The end of an era. The 60-gallon Anemone Cube had to be taken down today to make room for a new floor tile to be installed. This tank has been running since November 10th, 2013, which coincidentally comes out to a total of 3,000 days this tank's been running in succession. Housing a number of bubble tip anemones and about a dozen clownfish, 2 bengais, a couple of gobies. There's a couple of walking dendros, a beautiful type of fungia. There's been all kinds of livestock in this tank over the years, but it had to come down. It's being replaced with a new tank built by Planet Aquarium, and it's going to go on a new stand on the new tile floor. Looking in the tank, it just seemed like an overwhelming task to go ahead and take this down and to move all the livestock. And there was way too many anemones to keep. So some of them went to Chris, who came over to help me with this project last night. The majority of the bubble tip anemones are the nano-nems that I've been, collecting for some time. And there must have been 30, 40, 50 or more on the glass alone that had to be carefully scraped away. It sits on a steel stand that I put together way back, like I said, in 2013. And I always wondered how long it would last. So I'm kind of glad that I finally took it down before something bad happened. It housed some of the electrical gear that helped run the tank above it, but it really didn't do much more. While steel is considered a strong choice, I really feel like I overtaxed it when it came to this 60-gallon cube. Time to make a stand for the temporary aquarium that's ridiculously too strong. So we've got a piece of 1/2 inch of this CDX. We've got some scrap 2x4 for my project out here that I'm going to use to make the frame. Here are my short legs because they were just leftovers, and I see no reason to cut up a big 2x4 when I can use scrap. As you know, I've been working on my outside building trying to get it finished up, and so all my tools are out there, including my nail gun, power, tape measure, all the goodies. And so I took some time yesterday while the weather was semi-decent to go ahead and build this stand. Now, it just has to last, a week or two before everything goes into the new tank, but I just couldn't do it halfway. I just couldn't take chances and hope it'd be okay. Using scrap whitewood 2x4s, I made this stand 30 inches long, 12.5 inches wide, and 19 inches tall. And while I don't need anything overly complicated, I kind of did spend some time thinking my way through this to make sure I didn't put it together in a way where the legs would push up through the bottom of the tank or do something goofy. So I trimmed down some extra studs, I slid them into place, I nailed them in tightly, I hit them from different angles, and eventually I was done with the strongest stand on the planet for this little tiny tank. There are different ways of building wooden stands, and you can use nail guns, you can use a drill with screws, you can use glue, you can use a combination of all these, you could use pocket screws. For me, I'm basically just rough framing this all together because it's a temporary stand. But I'm still putting in these horizontal pieces. You're seeing me tap them into place and nail them secure. And the legs will actually press up against those horizontal plates. So that way I will have even pressure under the tank instead of 4 legs poking up into the corners of my little aquarium that I'm using to hold the livestock. This actual framing was just something that came to me on the fly. It wasn't something I'd seen in the past or was really crazy necessary. I mean, really, the whole thing being made out of 2x4s is crazy for such a small tank. But I needed something I could rely on to keep the tank stable, even though it's so temporary. It's kind of funny to have to spend so much time to make something that I won't need very long, but at the same time, if I did nothing, all the lives that I take care of would be put at risk. So I wanted to do something that I can trust and I can sleep and not be fretting about, not be worried or concerned, not something I might bump and knock over. So the 4 legs were almost installed. And then, of course, I have to put in a little bit of cross bracing as well. There's other things you can do. I mean, if you really want to make like a larger version of what I'm doing now, you might want to put wood siding on the sides to keep it from racking. You may want to put crossboards across the base. But even as you ramp it up, you have to keep in mind that if you're trying to put something underneath, like a sump, every single thing you put down there takes away precious inches that makes the sump smaller and smaller and more impractical to work with. In this case, I needed something tall enough to put the tank up on so that the tank could drain into the sump adjacent. so technically nothing's actually going under the stand, but I still didn't just have 4 legs come down. I didn't think that would be a smart move. All right, so the top piece is going into place, and now I want to show you the difference in the nails that I'm using because it matters. These are ring shank nails. These are normal 12-penny framing nails. Way too long to put down this decking, so I'm going to use this because it has those little teeth in there to bite into the wood below. With rough framing, you may need to actually square things up, so using this board as a guide, it helps me make sure everything is perfectly rectangular. At this stage, I had to decide how I was going to affix the base plate, and I'd considered different choices. I definitely wanted to keep the legs square with each other, and I didn't want to have to cut up a big 2x4 for some long runs, and I didn't want kick plates. But I wanted something to keep it stable while it sat on the fish room floor, which actually the fish room floor has that big rubber mat that it's a carpet that can absorb water. And so I wanted this to sit there and also kind of help itself self-level. I intentionally made these bottom pieces a little bit longer on each end, and then I nailed them in. But because everything's kind of wiggly, the nails didn't go in far enough. So I ended up using a spoiler board to support the legs so I could drive those nails in with a hammer so that everything was nice and secure. This final task had to be done on all 4 corners, and once it was completed, I could call it done. And there you have it, a ridiculously oversized stand to hold up a small amount of water for, I don't know, let's just say a week. I thought originally that I would center this in the room so I can get by on either side because this tank is going to be set up for a while and I still need to clean the glass, work on the skimmer, clean the algae turf scrubber. The piece of pink foam is what I always recommend you put underneath an acrylic tank. So I cut out a piece that matched the top of the stand, and then I put the tank on there. I made this years ago, and I was planning to do something with it, and it never got used, so it's brand new. I rinsed it out, I wiped it down, and I put it into place. I took my brand new MP40, and I put it on there. And then the return line coming into the tank will have a RFG put on the end to create random flow and keep the water chaotic. Jack wants to know what I'm doing. So I have 2 drains coming down from the temporary tank. They are going to be 1.5 inches. They'll reduce immediately down to 1 inch. Then it'll go into a 45 to send a pipe toward the sump. I might put this on there just because I have it. And then it'll go into an elbow, which will point down, and then an elbow at the water level. And that's kind of what I'm going to be pressing together. All this has to be glued and is sacrificed to the tank forever. This is something I'm trying to figure out. I'd like to use this as my return in the tank. I probably am going to have to use this fitting, which is threaded, glue it to this one because I didn't have one that was threaded on one side, and then reduce this down to 3/4 for this RFG. And lots of rigging to make this just work out, even though it's only going to run for a temporary time. About now is when Chris showed up, who came to help me for the evening and go way into the night. And I cleaned some sand in the front driveway, so I had some fresh sand in the tank that didn't have any pollutants. And then I used water from my big poly tank to fill up the tank with water up to the top. And then it would go down the brand new drains into the sump. And then there's a brand new Sicce SPK 7.0 that's adjustable that I'm going to use as a return pump to push water into the tank through the RFG. I'd like to point out that I put a zip tie around that silicone tubing to hold it onto the hose barb. It's very important to make sure your tubing doesn't pop off and flood your room and drain your sump. Also, you'll notice the tank is much closer to the reef, and that was thanks to Chris's recommendation. He said, why don't you just hug it to the tank and give yourself more room to walk around the tank in the room? And he was right, and I liked what he was suggesting. It also allowed me to move it over slightly to where the drain would go straight into the return zone, which it all just worked out really well plumbing-wise. Y'all know how much I love sand in a tank, and so even this little temporary one had to get a fresh sand bed just because. I haven't even plugged in the Vortec yet at this time because I was just watching the flow and how it was pulsing through the tank, and I'm actually very pleased with what it looks like at this point. A curious thing that Chris noted was that when I'm setting this up, I wasn't super excited. He thought most people like to set up a brand new tank, and here I am, I gotta set up a tank tonight. And finally, it is time to start removing the livestock and moving it into the temporary tank. Everything's been plumbed together, so the Anemone Cube is plumbed into the sump under the 400-gallon, and the new tank is plumbed into the sump under the 400-gallon, so everything's sharing the exact same water. And now I'm scraping off all those little anemones off the glass on the front and the side and the back. And then we grabbed the big rocks with anemones and moved them over and got them into that small tank as well. We literally started working on moving livestock at midnight, and we worked all the way till about 3 in the morning when we were finally done. And boy, was I tired. I actually felt instantly sore, which is crazy. Usually you feel sore the next day or 2 days later, but no, I felt it. My feet hurt, my back was sore. I was like, man, I am done. And I was really glad that everything went really well. The order of moving livestock was get all those little stingy anemones off the wall so we don't get stung on our arms or wrists, and then get the core out, and then look for snails and the walking dendros. And there was one rose anemone on the very back of the tank, and we had a really hard time trying to get it out because its foot was behind the overflow box. And then we used nets to scoop out the clownfish while the water level was really, really low in the tank, moved everyone over, moved the gobies, moved the bengais, moved the final rows, and then it was time to move the tank itself. All the electrical items underneath had to be unplugged and removed, and I had to get everything out of the way because we are taking this outside, completely out of the house. It's done. I am no longer using this tank. Chris brought over this really handy tool to cut through the pipe. And there was a little bit of water left inside, but not much.
I think we're almost done.
Oh, it's just a tiny bit.
Yep, I think we're almost done. Cool.
You say cool. I'm not even sure what this thing is called, and I kind of feel like I need one. He literally cut through 2 pipes in less than 1 minute flat, with a lot less effort than stuff I've used in the past. Okay. Number 2. See how much water we have.
Done and done.
So I guess we're going to try and lift upward maybe?
Yep, so what I would do is I would say, let's shimmy it. Oh, it's actually salt crusted to it. You want to step on the metal there? Wow. It's all one piece, brother.
Alright, I'll get the suction cups.
Well, what we could do, I can lower this down and we just put the whole thing on it.
I don't think we can because of the legs and everything. Remember we were talking about that?
I'm thinking we can go across those bottom bars. So this, take this all the way to the ground.
Bucket in the way.
Oh yeah, that would help. Just lift the whole thing. The suction cup would help though. Let's get them.
Yeah, I'm going to get them.
But I think I'll show you my thought.
So
Now,
if the board's coming with it, then the whole thing will slide forward because the board's on top of metal.
and then what I did when I was moving this by myself is just slide it onto here. We don't lift
Yeah,
at
but
all.
we are going to have to lift because of the pipes.
Correct at the end. And when it tilts, it should clear.
Okay.
Okay, so then you can let that set.
I did.
Okay. Now our pipes are almost over, so I'm just gonna lift my end and rotate,
Okay. Okay, stop.
and then you should be able to get yours down now. Ta-da!
Yay! No one got killed. Nice.
Okay.
This thing held up pretty well considering how old it is.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, like no rust at all.
Yeah, there's only a little
Powder
bit.
coated?
The bottom corner right here is what's been wearing some rusting right there.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen ones that are. I mean, I built mine 6 months ago and was trying.
So yeah, I ordered this. More than 8 years old in that spot, and yet you can barely tell an aquarium used to be there, except for the 2 bald spots on the wall where we couldn't reach to put the gray paint. So here is the new tank with the livestock in it. It's half as small as a 60-gallon cube, but it's going to do the job. As I mentioned before, there are 2 drains. So one side is basically doing a siphon, the other side is sort of like extra just in case. And it just goes through a union and through a straight line and then goes 90 straight into the sump, far away from the return pump to where there's no micro bubbles at all in any of the tanks. Everything looks really happy. I'm actually very pleased with the results. All those little anemones that were on the glass, I gave those to Chris. He took them. And so he probably got 30 or 50 of them. And I haven't even turned on the Vortec yet. I haven't seen the need. There's enough flow in the tank. All the tentacles are moving. I don't see any kind of dead spots. And I saw clownfish scattered everywhere. I'm still looking for the gobies. I know they're in there somewhere. But everything looks good. Let's take a look at that plumbing that we used to get water into the tank. This was actually a combination of pieces that Chris and I had. So here's the Seche pump. And then I used silicone tubing. And I used a zip tie with a magnet to hold it in place. It goes into a hose barb, into these fittings, into more fittings to go out the RFG. And you can see all the flow in the tank. It looks really good, and you'll see how the water changes on the surface as it randomly picks a different direction to shoot out water. I use these in the 400-gallon reef as well. And then I'm using the Kessel A360X to create light over the tank, and that light is just mounted with zip ties to the side of a speaker or to a microphone stand. That way I can have some light over the tank, and I can still get around in the room and not have things hanging from the ceiling and not have some big structure over the aquarium either. This is something I can move out of the way if there's a need. Now you're all caught up and you can see how the livestock are being taken care of while I wait for the floors to be finished.